The nights are dropping below freezing. The leaves are changing colors and some have already begun to fall. This can be a dangerous time of year for young trees, and you might not even know it. Join me today as I show you how to prepare trees for winter. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and this is an area of my garden where a lot of my fruit trees are. They're all relatively young, all less than 5 years in the ground. Varying sizes. I've got apples and pears and peaches and plums, and they've all come through every winter so far. The reason this can be such a dangerous time for plants is because the leaves are falling, because the trees are fading. And many gardeners think it's the end of the season. The trees are going to sleep. Well, it's quite the opposite. This time of year, in fall, when the temperatures are cold at night but still warm during the day, is the time of year that a lot of growth happens, mostly underground. The roots will continue growing until the ground freezes. Until the ground is frozen, until you're sure that your trees are dormant, you need to keep watering them. They're still alive, especially underground. If you allow the soil to dry out and to stay dry, you could be spelling doom for these trees. It's not unusual for a tree to die, and the cause of the death happened 2 or 3 years before. I mean, even these young trees are going to fight to survive. There's still a lot of energy in their roots. But if they get no water for months, it could spell a problem because they're going to use that energy and they might not be able to completely replenish it. So, on a regular basis, on warm days, preferably above 40 degrees Fahrenheit, get out in your garden and give your trees a deep watering, not just a surface watering. We want this to get down to the roots and not just around the trunk, because the roots are going to be growing outside the drip line of these trees. When it gets so cold, like here in my Colorado garden, that my hose freezes, this becomes a little bit of an effort. I've got to turn off the water, roll up the hose, make sure the water is drained out, and then bring it out again on a warm day. But if you do that periodically through the winter, your trees are going to do better. Take a cue from nature for this next protection. In the fall, the leaves fall off the tree. And for the most part, the leaves fall straight down onto the ground around the tree. But especially for young trees, there might not be enough leaves. So go ahead and use this time of year, fall, as an opportunity to mulch around your trees. Now, I have mulch around all of my trees, but over the course of the year, that mulch settles. Some of it begins breaking down. Some of it is even blown away or carried away. We want to go into the winter with this ground protected completely around the trees. Not only does mulch help hold in some of that water, some of the ground moisture to keep those roots growing, but also tends to stabilize the temperature a little bit so that when the ground does freeze, it's more gradual because this blanket of mulch is helping the tree get ready for winter. Go ahead and cover the area around the trunk with a nice couple inches of mulch. Now I like the wood chip mulch. It does a good job of holding in the moisture and moderating the temperature. And as I spread it, notice that I'm not putting it right next to the trunk. We want the area directly around the trunk clear. We can continue mulching with a couple inches close to the trunk and then deeper as we get farther away from the trunk. A lot of the mulch I have a few feet away from this tree is 3, 4, and 5 inches thick. There are a few reasons why you don't want the mulch stacked up against the trunk. You may have heard about the volcano of mulch that some gardeners do, where there's so much mulch that it actually forms a cone or a volcano over the trunk. That's a great way to introduce rot into the bark, because that mulch, remember, it's going to hold in moisture. And if that moisture is around the bark, that bark is eventually going to break down. So keep the mulch away to avoid your tree rotting. For many of us, we have pests, often rodents in the winter, that are looking for some easy food. And for young trees with thin bark, that is dinner waiting to happen. Voles are a problem in my garden, and voles will burrow just under that layer of mulch. If it's right next to the trunk, they can crawl all winter underneath the mulch with no threat of the owls or hawks as predators. They're protected. And then they just munch away at the bark, circling the tree and killing it. So give an area around your trunk to avoid the rot, to avoid the pests, and your trees are going to like it. Another thing we need to protect the bark from is the sun. The harsh sun can cause damage to the trunk, to that bark throughout the year. And especially the young trees are susceptible to that. So what we need to do is put something on these trunks to help minimize the damage that the sun can cause. Now, I like this whitewash from IV Organic, and I'll put a link below so you can check it out. This helps protect against sunburn in summer and sun scald in winter. So generally I apply it at least twice a year, in fall and again in spring. It's white, so it helps reflect the rays of the sun. And this company adds some other ingredients that actually helps to deter some of those pests that might be gnawing on it. It's simple. I just mix up a batch of this paint, and then I brush it on the trunk. Now I want to get as low as I can, especially on the side that is exposed to the sun. So I'll take my time. I don't have to worry too much, because remember, the mulch is not next to the tree. If some of this gets on the mulch, it's not a big deal. But I'm going to paint this on the tree all the way up to the first branches. These are what are going to get the most damage from the sun. You can continue on to the branches, but usually just doing the trunk is enough. And I'll do this with all of these young trees that are exposed to sun. There are other easy options to cover the trunk as well. You could put a plastic collar around the trunk. It does the same thing, keeping the sun off of the bark. And then you can also get these rolled rings of varying sizes to match your trunk. I prefer the IV Organic, but I got so many trees, I often run out of paint. So I always keep this as a backup. One of the issues with wrapping your tree with plastic, like this one and the first one that you saw, is that it can hold in moisture. It can actually promote some of that rot. And if a rodent gets up inside it, it's again completely protected from any potential predators. So I use both, depending on which supplies I have and depending on the size of the tree. This was the first year that I actually got a pretty good harvest off of this Liberty apple tree, but I didn't get it harvested before a pretty bad hailstorm. And the hail was enough to actually drop some of the fruit on the ground. A mistake that a lot of gardeners make with their fruit trees is leaving that fruit through the winter. And that's another thing you should do to help protect your tree for next year, because there are many insect pests that will overwinter in that fallen fruit. So make sure you pick up and either throw in the compost pile or discard, if it's been diseased, any of the fruit that might fall off the tree. Give your trees a fighting chance against pests by not creating an environment that encourages those pests in the first place. No doubt you've noticed that I have metal fencing around all of my young fruit trees, because in addition to insect pests and those rodents, I've got rabbits, and I've got deer that either want to gnaw on the trunk or nibble the branches. Now, when these trees were much smaller, this fencing was good enough to keep the deer completely away. As they get bigger, yeah, the deer will probably come in on a cold winter night when they're hungry and nibble some of these branches. So I'll throw bird netting over these trees. That's what these long colored pipes are for in the background. My granddaughters painted those metal conduits that I sunk in the ground. That helps hold the netting all the way around the tree, which deters the deer. And the fencing helps keep the deer away, in addition to keeping the rabbits out of this area. It's made a big difference, which is why I'm one of the few gardeners I know in my area that actually has fruit trees that have reached this size. And we all have a deer problem. Protecting your plants from those kind of pests can be very important if you want trees to survive more than just a single year. For the bigger trees that might have bigger trunks, you might not have as big an issue with those type of animals, but I still encourage that you protect your trunks. If you don't use the plastic, use something like this, a hardware cloth that you wrap around the tree. Paint the trunk, surround it with this hardware cloth, and you're going to keep those rodents and rabbits away from the trunks that you want to save. There are a few things that you may have heard you should do in the fall for your trees that I don't do. The first is to fertilize them. Now, if you do fertilize your trees, it's better to do it in the spring to promote and support some young new growth. You don't want that happening in the fall, because no doubt that new growth is going to appear. You're going to get a hard freeze. And it's going to kill all those young leaves, shoots, maybe even full branches because they're too tender. And with the snow melt and potential rains you might have, a lot of that fertilizer might be washed away before the ground freezes and the roots can even access it. Another thing I don't do is stake the trees. These are trees that I just put in this year. In their first year, I want them to become established. I want the roots to grow and support these trees, and I want the trunks to develop to be strong in my Colorado winds. I started with bare root plants, and that helps, but staking the trees can actually be detrimental to the trees because they don't develop that movement that actually strengthens the trunk. So I will use some thick twine or ropes to shape the trees like you might have seen in some of the other areas. But in the first couple years of growth, I just let the trees be natural and get as strong as they can get before I start training them into the shapes that I want them to grow into. And another thing that I don't do for the trees going into winter is prune. Now, if I have diseased branches, or if some branches are broken and they're beginning to affect the growth of the tree, you can prune those at any time of year. But for the structural growth, I'm going to wait until later in winter to do any of that pruning. I'm not going to do it in the fall. I want to wait for the right time of year. You might not be able to get it all done in one day. It takes me a couple days to do the mulching, do the watering, do the painting, doing the protecting of all of my trees. But once it's done, I can just sit back and relax throughout the entire winter and know that my trees are going to be fine when spring finally appears. If you want to see some of the other things that I've done with my trees, go ahead and watch this video next. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.